So good morning, everybody. So happy to be with you today. Hope you're having a beautiful day at the beach as we're having here in Greensboro. We're blessed, right? So I want to begin with this ancient story from the book of Genesis. You've probably heard it. I know you have. It's the story about the twin cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and a man named Lot. Sodom and Gomorrah were so filled with depravity that their name has, over the ages, remained synonymous with unconscious, sense-based, materialistic living. After many signs and warnings, God decided there was nothing to do with the place but burn it to the ground. Lot was the one righteous man in the city, so God sent angels to warn him to get out before the destruction began. Here's the account from the book of Genesis. When morning dawned, the angels came to Lot's house and urged him, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your two daughters away from this place, lest you all be consumed in the punishment of the city." Lot hesitated, but the Lord was merciful to him, and so he sent angels to seize him, take hold of his wife and daughters, and drag them outside the city. And when they had done so, the angel said to them, "Flee for your lives. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Flee to the hills, lest you be consumed." But even as the city burned, Lot's wife dragged her feet and simply could not resist turning and looking back. Instantly, she became a pillar of salt. This familiar story is a perfect description of the human condition. So God speaks to Lot and says, "Get out of here. Bad things are about to happen." But Lot hesitates. So the Lord, who is merciful, grabs him up and throws him out of harm's way. Haven't you ever had the sense that you were in an unhealthy or dangerous situation, but didn't trust your intuition enough to make the change you knew you ought to make? Boy, I have. That job you hated but were afraid to quit, and then ended up being fired or having some terrible thing happen. The unhealthy relationship you couldn't leave until something really upsetting and a crisis occurred. It's what my dad used to call the hard way, or the 2x4 way of living. Lot's wife is no different. She takes the kids and follows Lot out of the city, but is so loaded down by regret and grief that she can't move on. She stands as a graphic symbol of a person who cannot seem to let go of the past, which I'm sure you'll agree is often easier said than done. Imagine if your house burned down and you lost everything: your home, your belongings, your friends and neighbors, your livelihood. And suppose there was no one left in the town to help you because they were worse off than you were. And so you had to go, but did so feeling guilty for leaving those loved ones behind, for saving yourself instead of going down with the ship. Emotionally stuck between regret and fear of the unknown, you could not move. Excruciating. Like that dream, that dream that most of us have had at one time or another, where we sense danger but are paralyzed and can't get out of the way? Lot refused to see the red flags all around him, could not recognize, much less accept, his own vulnerability. His wife was frozen with fear, grief, and guilt. The divine voice within them had told them to not look back, to simply trust and go forward. Their inner faculties of love and wisdom had counseled them to let go of what was and look forward to the future, warned them that holding on to fear, anger, and grief would sap their strength and their energy. They were told to look toward the hills, to reach for a greater thought and a higher consciousness. And yet they resisted. We would never do that, would we? Right. Well, this is what the God power of renunciation is all about. Because Lot's wife could not help looking back, she was so flooded by pain that she remained horribly stuck between what was and what could be. A pillar of salt, they said, the perfect metaphor, because salt was the preservative of the day. And so here it represents the retention of old patterns and longings for what once was. Millions of us have been caught up in this yearning for the past. As troubled as that world back there was, it seems that we would often rather deal with familiar pain than face the uncertain future. And many times, recently, the results have been devastating. The news bombards us with stories and images of people displaced by fires, flood, drought, violence, and poverty. So often, in fact, that God help us, we have almost become numb. Stalemate is the headline story everywhere in the world today. We're willing to fight with each other over vaccines, even a simple thing like wearing a mask. Two scary choices: go forward into unknown territory or return to past pain, have left us stuck in the mud. But the thing is, human beings were designed for evolution. We can never really go backwards. The pain of the past is familiar, that's true, but it is chronic and stifling and depressing. And yes, accepting change is painful, but resisting change is agonizing. And yes, catastrophic losses are horrible. The only thing that can make them more painful is endless longing for what was, combined with the hopeless struggle to recreate that which cannot be restored because it's not supposed to be restored. Folks, the evolutionary process is underway. We can kick and we can scream, but we cannot stop it. Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, writes, "It is just as necessary to let go of thoughts, conditions, and substances once they have served their purpose and are no longer needed, as it is to lay hold of new ideas." Yes, because circulation is the law of life in the physical domain. It is the basis for prosperity in all our affairs. A right balance of giving and receiving, taking and letting go, is essential to health in mind, body, and spirit. Unity offers tremendously powerful, life-enhancing ideas. It only makes sense then, though, that our old ways of thinking, our old habits, our negative patterns must be let go in order for these new ideas to take root. Just as great vegetables can only be grown in fertile soil, new thought principles can only bear fruit in our lives if there is room in our minds and hearts to receive them. As a practical matter, whether or not we recognized it at the time, we have all been through and will continue to go through physical, emotional, and spiritual experiences of cleansing. I still remember the cry of a newcomer who was in one of my foundations classes, and she says, "Oh my God, all this study, and I'm more confused and unsure than I was 5 years ago. I recognize this. I know firsthand that it's very possible. Jesus and I went round and round for years after I came to Unity. Actually, I now see that these inner confrontations are inevitable. New ideas, a new way of seeing, comes up against deeply entrenched habits and beliefs. This is not an easy situation. Part of us longs for the certainty of the past. As a Catholic, I was told to not even listen to any other theology. Eventually, I could no longer accept this. Why? Because we humans are highly intelligent. We have an inherent sense of truth. At some point, we come up against a challenge that our old belief system cannot handle. But still, when that old way of thinking, the one that created the problem in the first place, when it arises and is confronted with a higher or healthier truth, it can feel for a time as though there is war in the soul. Part of us is ecstatic and relieved. We recognize these new ideas. They resonate with us. But still, part of us wants to resist because letting go of sacred cows wreaks havoc on our love of having the answer. At times, the inner conflict can get pretty rough, depending on how deeply entrenched this old mind is. Privately, and I confess it here, something inside of me is happy when I hear someone admit they are confused, because I recognize it as the hallway between the old and the new. Patience is the order of the day when it comes to spiritual growth. Since coming to Unity, many of us have taken part in some rich discussions about what a burden it is to carry regret or guilt over past mistakes. We've learned that when these feelings are lodged deep in the spirit, they have the power to block our happiness and fulfillment in the present. I don't think there's a woman among us who has felt nervous after a bad breakup to begin a new relationship. Often, healing from those past hurts requires action on our part. Daily prayers of denial in which we set and preferably speak out loud our heartfelt intention to release the way of thinking and acting that no longer serves us. Sometimes this means admitting we're wrong, sincerely apologizing, even possibly making some sort of restitution. If it does, Mr. Fillmore says, do it as soon as possible and then move on to living life in the present. Many of us have found that it helps to have the support of a good counselor or spiritual coach as we go through the stages that lead to letting go. I will always be grateful for the wise, loving mentors, guides, and therapists who have helped me work through the complicated feelings surrounding change and loss. I've experienced my share of regret, sorrow, guilt, shame, and fear like every one of you. Like you, I have at times beat myself up and resisted change. I needed support to feel my feelings fully and then have the courage to let them go, to face my error thinking and allow myself to heal. It's not easy to admit mistakes, face our pain and the pain we've caused others. It's humbling to ask for help, but for me, it has been well worth it because I found out that freedom and peace are possible. The intention to let go and heal draws to us incredible grace. Fillmore says that grace is the forgiving love of God that frees us from past mistakes and the karmic residue of these mistakes. Through the power of divine love, we can forgive ourselves. We can let go of old ways of thinking and behaving. We can open to a greater idea and a greater experience of life. Renunciation is the ongoing, moment-to-moment faculty of mind and heart that enables us to let go of outworn ideas in order to allow in greater ones. God knows we do this every time a new and better version of something comes on the market, don't we? What version of iPhone are we on these days anyway? When it comes to the concepts that have shaped our identity, it's a challenging process. When I came to Unity in the mid-'80s, I was steeped in Catholicism. I had left the Catholic Church because I couldn't resolve the spiritual and philosophical conflicts I had with some of the dogma. But after wandering from church to church for 6 to 7 years, I finally landed in Unity. And from the first moment, I felt that I had come home. What a relief it was to finally have an inner resonance with what I heard and felt from others. But even so, as I went deeper into the study of Unity principles, I struggled. Old ideas die hard when they have once been accepted as truth. And besides, no way was I going to simply swallow hook, line, and sinker another set of beliefs. I refused to accept anything until I could feel its truth in my heart and soul. And that meant the old and the new had to sometimes go through a wrestling match. Are you with me? Another Old Testament story that encouraged me was the one about Jacob's battle with the angel. It went on for a long time, throughout the whole night, and Jacob got pretty beat up. Yet he shouted at the angel and demanded, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Over time, I was intrigued, but over time, I've come to realize that this was a pretty profound moment, because I don't think we can fully heal until we're able to see that all the decisions we've made and all the beliefs we've clung to, both the ones that enhanced our lives and the ones that cause us or others pain, are essential parts of our unfolding story. They have taught us and changed us and caused us to reach higher, to not stop in the valley, but flee to the hills. The key to spiritual well-being is letting go of the perception that anyone or anything can keep us from our good. When we begin to understand at a deep level that we are floating in and surrounded by love, that we are inherently good people, something I had to be told over and over again, that life is meant to be both exciting and challenging. When we begin to understand these things, we are no longer slaves to our own limited perceptions, and life is free to thrive and prosper. Rachel Naomi Raymond, many of you know her, in her beautiful book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, tells the story of a beautiful ring that she designed and cast. It had been technically difficult to make, and she was very proud of it. The ring had attracted a great deal of admiration and attention, and since Rachel was in medical school and needed a stream of income, she decided to take it to a craftsman near her home in Esalen, California, to duplicate it so she could sell copies to others. Seemed like a great idea. She spent a beautiful afternoon at a gallery by the sea, talking about art with the jeweler, a gentleman and a gifted artist, and then headed home with a light spirit. On the way home, it began to rain heavily, and by nightfall, the rain had turned into a wild and violent storm. The next morning, Rachel received the shocking news that during the night, a section of Route 1 north of Esalen had been literally swept into the Pacific Ocean. The gallery where she had left her ring had been washed into the sea also. The gallery and her precious ring were gone forever. Immediately, voices inside her head began running their familiar commentary. The loudest was her father's, saying, "This would never have happened if you hadn't been so greedy as to try and make money from your ring. How stupid can you be? And you planning to be a doctor." Then there was her mother's. "Don't tell me you've been so careless again. You know, I could never trust you with anything valuable. You always seem to lose it somehow." In anguish, Rachel went to the edge of the cliffs and looked down at the Pacific, still wild from yesterday's storm. As she watched the ocean hammer the cliffs, it came to her that nothing unnatural had occurred here. Pieces of land had been falling into the ocean for millions of years. Perhaps all the familiar blaming voices in her mind were wrong. Perhaps there was some larger process at work. Rachel studied the empty place on her finger where the ring had been, feeling her loss deeply, but also feeling something less familiar, something different. Along with the sadness, there was an awakening sense of curiosity. What would come to fill up that space on her finger? Would she make another ring? Or would she find one in a secondhand shop, perhaps even in another country? Perhaps someday, someone she had not yet even met come along and give her a ring because he loved her. What a revelation. And I never forgot this story, because the thing is, folks, empty spaces do not remain empty. Losses create openings for something new. Sadness can open our hearts and cause us to grow in wisdom and maturity. Rachel realized that up until that moment, she had always been holding on to what she had: her feelings, her past experiences, her money, her embedded impressions. Yet in the space of just 1 hour, the empty space left by the loss of her ring had taken on all the anticipation and excitement of a wrapped Christmas present. By forgiving, that is, letting go of the self-immolating voices in the head and being willing to see through cosmic eyes, Rachel's pain was healed. We human beings long to find meaning behind our difficulties. So instead of seeing the painful things that happen to us as further evidence of our unworthiness, could we not, with just as much conviction, see them as purifications? After all, one of the great gifts of the spiritually centered life is alchemy, transmutation of hurt and grief into things of poignant beauty, like compassion, gratitude, and love. Which brings me, forgive me, I know I'm running a little long, but it brings me to a final story, one of my absolute favorites, about a man named Jim who lives in a house near a mountain with a backyard that is actually a small meadow. Jim is very blessed because all throughout the summer and the fall, a beautiful stag has been visiting his meadow at dawn and at twilight. But here's the thing. Jim never planned to have a stag. He planned to have a rose garden. He had planted with great care 15 beautiful rose bushes in the meadow, each one a housewarming gift from a friend. For a time, the rose garden was glorious. Then the roses started disappearing. Puzzled, Jim became determined to catch whatever was eating his roses. He wanted to catch them in the act. And so he got up at dawn, looked out the window of his garden, and was transfixed by the sight of that six-pointed stag as the great creature ambled across the yard, browsed for a while among the roses, and then delicately ate one of the Queen Elizabeths. Every year since then, Jim has had a choice to make. Should he build a high fence and have a beautiful rose garden? Or should he have a magnificent stag visit him 10 feet from his back door? Each year, he chose the stag. For 2 years, they watched each other through the window pane, until this year, that is. This year, Jim was able to sit outside in the yard as the stag dined on his sumptuous roses. Jim's friends cannot believe he cultivates his roses only to allow the stag to eat them. But he just smiles and he says to them, "You see, it's like this. I thought I was planting roses to have roses. And now seems that I was planting rose bushes in order to have 1/2 an hour of silence with the magical animal every morning and every evening." You know, friends, it is possible to walk through this world assuming love is what's happening. You all know I've told you before about the time I passed that teenage boy was wearing the bright red t-shirt inscribed with bold white letters that said, "I have no idea what's going on." I remember how I just howled with laughter because isn't it true? We try so hard to figure things out, but in the end, we'll never see the whole truth. So why not let go and embrace the idea that love is what's going on? I don't know about you, but I think life would be a whole lot more fun. And since we can't see the big picture, we might as well trust that love is what's happening and open the door to freedom, joy, and prosperity. God bless you all. And now let's let Deidre lead us into a time of meditation.
This is a beautiful song by Daniel Nahmod, and it's called Everything New. Bring it on, everything new, everything different, everything true. I am ready for my next thing to do. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything new. I'm through crying and I'm through waiting. I'm through hoping against all hope. I'm through longing for something gone that will never return. I think I finally learned, so bring it on. Everything new, everything different, everything true. I am ready for my next thing to do. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything new. And I'm through grieving, and I'm through dreaming that stuff that will never be mine. Oh, I think it's time, so bring it on. Everything new, everything different, everything true. I am ready for my next thing to do. No, I know it's gonna be everything new. No, not surviving many times before. Broken hearts and slammed doors. It'll be alright, yes, once more, just as I did back then. And I'm gonna rise again, so bring it on. Everything new, everything different, everything true. I am ready for my next thing to do. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything new. Bring it on. Everything new, everything different, everything true. I am ready for my next thing to do. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything new. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything new.
Oh, my friends, let's just breathe that in. What a gift. Let's breathe in the breath of new life. Breathe out stress and worry. Allow our own breath to cleanse our minds and bodies and spirit. Let us know peace. Let us know that we cannot be separate ever from God, our source. We have been given the most beautiful gifts: a life to live, a mind to reason, a heart with which to love, teachings that uplift and guide us. The universe is always providing everything we need to flourish and prosper. Can you feel that you are totally supported and cared for? So we let go of struggle, of resistance. We let go of fear that our plans may not work out the way we want them to. Our life is created from God life. Our minds are connected to God mind. Our heart beats the love of God. All is truly well. And as we move into this moment, this time of silence, I invite you to take with you this beautiful poem by our old friend Hafiz, a Sufi, ancient writing. He says this: now is the time to know that everything is sacred. So why not consider a lasting truce with yourself and with your God? Now is the time to realize that all your ideas of right and wrong were just a child's training wheels to be laid aside when you are finally ready to live with truth and love. My dear, please tell me, why do you still throw sticks at your own heart and at your God? What is it in that sweet sounding voice inside that incites you to fear? Now is the time to compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace. Now is the season to know that everything is sacred. In the silence. What a precious time to relax, to breathe, to affirm the truth that God is source, the one reality, the be all and the end all. God is life itself. And for this awareness, we are deep grateful. And so it is.
Bring it on, everything new, everything different, everything true. I am ready for my next thing to do. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything new. Oh, I know it's gonna be everything